back now to California, likely decriminalizing psychedelics as that bill awaits Governor Newsom's signature. We have the results of a new survey from the UC Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics. And it shows a majority of Americans, 61%, support regulating psychedelics for therapeutic use. Here with us now is Imran Khan, Executive Director of the Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics. Thank you so much for being here. As we mentioned, there is support for legalizing these substances, people on board with using them for treatment. Here are some more stats from your survey. About 80% of people say they like the idea of using them for terminal illnesses. If we can put this up on the screen, to help prevent veterans, about 69% say they see advantages to using this for veterans with, let's say, PTSD, and about 67% said they support using this for people who are suffering from treatment-resistant depression and anxiety. So it's clear that people do see a benefit here.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. As many of your viewers will have seen and read in the media, we have lots of studies coming out in recent years showing that for conditions like depression, like PTSD, certain psychedelics, when combined with therapy and psychological support, can have these tremendous benefits. So we were really interested to figure out, what do ordinary Americans think about psychedelics? So we conducted this nationwide survey of registered voters, and as you've just shown on the screen, we found that clear majorities were in favor of certainly more research. We found that over 3/4 of American voters want to make it easier for there to be science done on psychedelics. And 61% said that we want regulated access, which is really interesting. So just to give you some comparable figures, it took decades of campaigning on issues like same-sex marriage, like marijuana legalization, for you to get those comparable figures of 60% plus for supporting legal change.
Okay, some of the other things that your survey found that we found interesting here, about 45% say they approve of psychedelic therapy to also help treat addiction. Obviously, you know, addiction is something that we're seeing on the streets of several Bay Area cities, especially San Francisco. They also point out that, you know, this needs to be something that is regulated for those over the age of 21. Surprised at all by these results?
I think what you're seeing there is a different level of comfort that Americans have with these different treatment populations. So the population group that came out highest in terms of the number of Americans that would say, yes, these people should be allowed to access psychedelic therapy, perhaps unsurprisingly, was those with terminal illnesses. So one of the interesting groups that's come out in the research is when you have people who are suffering from and dying with cancer. There have been some really interesting studies showing that treatment with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, again, combined with therapy, can drastically reduce end-of-life distress. And I think perhaps what you're seeing is, with those figures being so high, people saying, well, of course, if someone's in that scenario when the options are limited and when clearly there's such a life-limiting and life-threatening situation in place, why not allow them to access the potential benefits here? But for other groups, so for instance, people with addiction, but also perhaps the general public as a whole, so, you know, as the data said, anyone over 21, more people have reservations. There is still many people that say, yes, you should allow people to access these substances therapy to help. And there is some interesting research coming out that psychedelics can be tremendously powerful when it comes to addressing substance use disorder and addiction, but more people have reservations about those use cases.
Yeah. When you talk about reservations, I also found this aspect of the survey interesting because it really shows what people think about their own personal use and if they think overall psychedelics are good for society. And here's what your survey found. About 61% say no, they do not perceive psychedelics as good for society. And when it comes to themselves, 69% said that they do not perceive it as something for people like them.
I thought this was one of the most interesting things to come out of the data. So, you know, we found clear majority saying, yes, let's open this up. Let's create a regulated legal pathway for people to access psychedelics and therapy. And at the same time, what clear majority also saying, I'm not convinced it's good for society. I don't think it's for people like me. I think what we're maybe seeing there is people saying, you know, we want a liberal society, we want there to be options for people to access if it's right for them. But I still potentially see psychedelics as something that's fringe, that's something that I want to know more about before I would access myself. So I don't necessarily view those things as a complete paradox, but clearly people still have less personal comfort with using psychedelics and psychedelic therapy themselves than there would be with other people potentially using them.
All right, well, we appreciate you coming on and breaking down the results of this survey, again, as we await for Governor Newsom to make a decision on that bill. Thank you so much again for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
Back